Good morning, everyone. Welcome to session 3 of Navigating the New Landscape of Food Processing, Operational Efficiency in Action. In the first session, we examined how the food processing landscape has changed since the arrival of COVID-19. We then looked at the benefits of shifting our focus to what we can control. And today we will explore how to get tangible benefits. I'm going to introduce you to Dilley Naidoo, CEO of Madala and Associates. Dilley has over 45 years of international business experience as a business strategist, mentor, and coach. He has a 3rd Dan black belt in karate and has a passion for studying ancient civilizations. Dilley, over to you.
Thank you, Caroline, and good morning to all. We have an exciting lineup of presenters and speakers this morning that will be focusing on the operational efficiencies. Before we do that, I wanted to give you a very high-level snapshot of the current social and economic challenges of COVID-19. So if we look at business in general, almost every single industry sector has been impacted in some way or the other by the lockdown, from decreased mining, although some of the precious metal companies are starting to kick up. Agricultural production is starting to pick up slightly. The most obvious one has been the travel, tourism and the hospitality industry that's been highly impacted, with a number of job losses in waitering, in front office jobs, in the hotel environments, etc. And of course, there's been huge fiscal impact and job losses. On the food processing side, it's obvious to most of you in food processing that the lockdown has impacted you on the supply side. Especially if you were relying on imported raw materials. The initial shock in terms of the increased demand and the uncertain times has impacted your planning tremendously. But I think one of the key things that I've noticed is the customer behavioral changes in terms of the products, especially from a convenience perspective. So COVID-19 has increased and accelerated the needs for business alignment and integration. And the great digital accelerator is started in 2020 by COVID. And it's really an inflection point for the digital business. And the lockdown then forced companies to adapt and transformed at an accelerated pace. And basically, the consequences of inaction are immediate and no turning back. So a digital organization needs agility. You need to be very agile. You need to be creative and innovative. And you need to start re-looking and going back to basics in terms of the purpose of the business, your business capabilities, the resources, and more importantly, the management systems and processes that you have. So one example that I've brought today is McDonald's, who's been around for just under 70 years. And if you look at McDonald's, the whole goal was, drive-through, very good promise on efficiency and very quick deliveries. They today serve over 1% of the world's population. That's over 70 million people. They're fanatical about the design and the management of their stores, and their processes and their systems that they have, but they follow a rigorous routine day in, day out, doing exactly the same thing and fine-tuning based on customer requirements. And of course, they've created a worker culture across the world, regardless of in which geography they are located in. So if you look at McDonald's, they look at what is the business purpose? What is it that we do and why we do this? And I think this is a great time now for companies to re-examine, as basic and simple as it sounds, what is it that you actually do and why do you do this? And what is a new business model and strategy? And what are you trying to win to further this purpose? More importantly, what do you need to do to be good and win in this environment using your business capabilities? And we'll be speaking a lot on the operational efficiencies this morning. And of course, the business value chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So if you look at McDonald's today, they are represented in over 100 countries, 35,000 locations, but you get exactly the same experience in McDonald's, whether it's in China or the US or in South Africa. I think the food industry is one of the most fortunate industries in that every human being around the globe, currently at 7.7 billion people, need to eat at least 3 meals a day. And the meal that you have for breakfast is very different from lunch and dinner. So the market opportunity for you as a food processor is tremendous. If we look at Africa, there's over 1 billion people, and closer to home in South Africa, there's over 60 million people. So it's one of the few sectors that provides a tremendous opportunity for you to capture the market niche that you focused on. With that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Ian Huntley. Ian is currently the CEO and co-founder of Rifle Shot Performance Holdings. Ian is also the co-founder of MAP, the Manufacturing Accelerator Program. Ian has several years' experience in the manufacturing sector. On his personal side, he is a guitarist. He also likes motorbikes and cars. So Ian's going to be focusing a lot on the implementation methodology and the roadmap on the shop floor. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Dilley. So in the last session, we had a look at some of the whys, and I'll just refresh your memory on it in what I call today the Zen of Implementation, because I think we all know that we can have the greatest ideas in the world, but if you can't get them implemented, they mean nothing. We know that at a political level, and if you look at a Gartner report of a couple of years ago, up to some 85% of complex systems implementations are failures. So I'm going to look at what we can do to prevent those failures. So the first part of this is to make a real return. So the idea of implementing something is you want to get benefit out of it. If you don't get benefit, why are you doing it? To recap, in the last session, we asked these 3 vital questions. Where are you going? Where are you now? And what do you need on the trip? And we looked at the information architecture approach, and I'm going to build on this again today. One is do a top-down design, know what you want, go down to the level at which you have good data, solid, trustworthy data that you can actually use, and then build from the bottom up. And Kurt will touch on some of that. The slides I looked at last time round was the maturity matrix, which we will take each of our customers through to see what is the next level, because clearly doing advanced mathematics in grade 1 is not a good solution. The second item is where are you in the industrialization curve? So to give you an example, to do linear programming, advanced planning and scheduling when you don't even know what stock you've got, what value and where it is, would not be good. And in today's 4th industrial revolution, the key is the intercompany dependency. Now, If you don't have your own act together, it would be hugely dangerous to connect to somebody else. And the last thing we looked at last time round was the whole Sand-Kona priorities, where to start. So your traditional approach to implementing a system is what I call the serial implementation. I think we all know the triad of people, process, and technology. And we know that doesn't work if we take Gartner's results. So what would be a better approach? So from one of the disadvantages that we see in a traditional approach is it's slow to realize benefits because you have to do each step serially. You very often lose momentum, you lose interest from the participants in the project because it takes too long. Time is money, which makes it expensive. And then I've been on a number of projects where the market changes faster than the implementation time. So that's not going to work. It's not a good solution. So when I introduced the word Zen, Zen is all about flow. And those of you who are familiar with ISO know it's based on PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. So what are the 5 questions we need to answer at each of these steps? The first and the most important one, if you know Simon Sinek, is why. What is your purpose? Why are you doing this? And I'm going to iterate, you need to do this at each of the levels of implementation. I'll show you in the lighthouse a bit later on. So why do you want to put it in? Why? What's driving you? So if we look at the other 4 questions, can you answer what, who, when, and how for each substage of your project? So each time you start with why, what are we going to do? Who's going to do it? When are they going to do it by? And how are they going to affect it? I've seen too many implementations that go from what to how, and they forget about the who and the when. So back to our 3 pillars, people, process, and technology. Yes, we need all 3, but instead of doing them serially, how about we do them all together? So, and the reason behind this is people without process, without technology, isn't going to work. So the modern way, according to IDC and other consultants and our own experience, is you implement all 3 of these at the same time. So you bring the people on board, you discuss the processes and the technologies, or you discuss the technologies and you bring the people and processes together. But the net effect is all 3 need to happen simultaneously. Then you build a good foundation. Do we have the technologies? Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the processes to control the project? From there, what we want to do is build good data. And I can't emphasize this part enough. Without good data, almost everything else in your hierarchy is a waste of time. We've seen too many companies that make poor decisions based on bad data. Now, that bad data may be incomplete data, it may be factually incorrect, it may be it's not arriving at the right time, and we'll talk to that a bit later. But good data is a holistic concept. The right data at the right time in the right level of detail. When you have good data, you can convert it through MES systems, ERP systems, whatever tool you're using for the next layer into good information. With good information, you can start to make good decisions. Now, those initial good decisions will be based on what I call flat data. From there, we want to go into the optimizing technologies. And this is where, for example, linear programming or artificial intelligence, a whole subject on its own, or predictive analytics, or any one of these technologies can add value and inform the good decisions. And what we're looking for is to become a segment leader. I used to work for a very visionary boss, and he said, look, if you're number one in your industry sector, you're likely to be making good returns for your shareholders. If, however, you're at number two, you're probably going to break even. If you're at number three or lower, you're probably losing money. So why are you in the game at all? So as we climb from the good foundation, we climb this ladder. The company and the people and the technologies, all three mature and the profits grow. So to summarize, flow is more important than any one of these individual pillars of process, technology, or people. You start with the why at each layer. Why do I want good data? Why do I want good information? Why do I want good decisions? And then pack that out. You build progressively and at each stage measure what you're doing and the results. From there, you can show returns at each level. And there's nothing like little wins every couple of days or every week where you can show, hey guys, we're on the right track, we're making progress. And lastly, without your top-down support and bottom-up build, the project will not fail. So put those in from day one. So Rifle Shot's professional services team, we're here to guide you. Just give us a call. And remember, be so positive on the project. It's infectious. Negative people won't want to be around you. The naysayers won't be there. And with that, I'll hand you back to Dilley.
Thank you, Ian, for an excellent presentation. So the expectation of buying something called 4.0 Industry 4 or 4IR is a journey, and I think that's a very good illustration of a journey methodology of how you can achieve the kind of things that companies are seeing in brochures. Our next speaker is Rowan. Kurt is joining us this morning all the way from the UK. So welcome, Kurt. We appreciate you joining us. Kurt is a solutions consultant with a company called Aptean. Aptean is very involved for several decades in the food processing sector. And Kurt manages with the team the Europe, Middle East, and Africa region. And we work very closely at RSPH with Aptean. In his personal time, Kurt also likes the movies and swimming. When there's some sunshine, he also goes surfing. So Kurt, over to you.
Thank you very much for that, Dilley. Let me just steer the slides here. Bear with me, everybody. I'm just trying to get control. Here we are. Perfect. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thanks again, Dilley, for the introduction. So as Dilley mentioned, I'm Kurtis Rowan. I'm one of the solution consultants here at Aptean, covering the EMEA region. So I'll be taking you through this section today on the vehicle that we can use to drive our operational success. And as you know, and particularly for those of you that were here around on our previous webinars within the series, you'll know that Aptean is a global software solution provider that's mostly got software that's really been designed to enable our customers to drive operational efficiency through their business. And particularly for those of them like yourselves who we have on the call here in the food landscape, all who have very unique industry challenges that certainly need addressing. And so with that in mind, I'm really excited to share with you today a small overview of our product line, FactoryMES. So this is a solution that gives manufacturers the ability to drive to a paperless quality environment. It gives them real-time performance management from raw materials all the way through to finished goods so that you've got a full picture of your production's effectiveness, which is going to be, of course, vital when we're wanting to reduce costs and drive productivity. As a side note, I want to say also it's great to see that we've got so many people tuning in on the call today. And I'm aware when I looked at the attendees, we've got a mixture of people that are coming from different departments. We've all got different roles and responsibilities around in the business. And so with that in mind, I thought it'd be good to start this off with a couple of key positioning slides, which is going to give you some of the context as to how we can typically take signals from the automation and control layer on the shop floor to enable us to gain that real-time performance management that we're after. And so with that in mind, I thought it was best to start with what is OEE and how do we measure it in FactoryMES? And I'm sure this is going to be all too familiar with the people listening in on the call today, but potentially for those that haven't had that much exposure to some of the manufacturing KPIs, OEE stands for Overall Equipment Effectiveness. It's a key manufacturing KPI that enables us to understand both how our lines are performing on the shop floor and more importantly, where are our opportunities to improve. It's a calculation that's expressed as a percentage, and it takes into account these three levers that you see here. So we first have our rate. So this is, if you think about it as our speed losses. So if you had a theoretical maximum to produce 100 crisps every minute, but unfortunately we ran slow and produced 80 crisps every minute, we'd have a rate of 80%. Our yield looks at what we've put into the process compared to what we've got out of the process. So if I put 100 bottles into the process, but we rejected 50 of them for whatever reason, then we'd have a yield of 50%. And then finally, we have our utilization, which is our uptime over our planned available time to produce. So if we plan to produce in the entire 12-hour shift, but unfortunately we bumped into problems with stoppages that lasted for say 6 hours out of that 12-hour shift, we'd have a utilization of 50%. And so what we do is we times those three together and it gives us a very cruel percentage, but it shows us where the opportunities are. And so typically in factory, to achieve this information, we only actually require a few basic signals from the production line. So if you look up on this diagram here, you'll see this is just a standard filling and packing line making jam jars. In this particular process, we look for an in-count sensor at the beginning of the process, and that's going to show us what product's going in. It's going to show us the speed that we're running at, any stoppages that occur on the line. And then we have an out count sensor at the end, which is going to say, well, what's that final 12-pack product, which is going on out there to be shipped to customers, to stores. In between, it's advantageous, although not essential, if you've got automatic push-off points from rejected products, say from being overweight, bad label reads, metal rejects, we can take that into the application. And also along with things like process parameters, like temperature and humidity, which are all going to be very important, particularly for yourselves, within the food landscape. And I thought I'd quickly just share that with you because I often hear there's a misconception that for a project where we're getting real-time performance management, sometimes people might think that there's going to be heavy investment needed into upgrading PLCs or investing in new machines and a bunch of new sensors. Well, that's just not the case. So with all our customers, we look for a very cost-justified approach. So we'll always adapt and grow with the existing level of infrastructure that we see at the plant. Okay, great then. So let's have a look at what OEE looks like in action then. So in this particular process, as we said, we're filling jam jars here. Everything's going smooth. It doesn't look like we've bumped into any problems here. And as a result, what you can see is that we've got an OEE of 100%. Let's say though something more realistic happens. Let's say the machine stops working. What we're going to notice in real time is our utilization bar start to drop because we've had a problem with downtime. As you can see, that's impacted our OEE score there. Let's say now the operators, they've turned the lines down, we're running slow. As you can imagine, that's going to reduce your rate and it's going to further impact the OEE here. And then finally, if we're rejecting the product, it's overweight, these jam jars, you're going to see that impact your yield. And that's actually had a detrimental impact, as you can see on the OEE score. And why it's so important for manufacturers to look at all the different loss avenues like this is because if you just looked at rate, for example, and said, well, 79% of our theoretical maximum speed, it's okay. I mean, we have done better in the past, but I still think it's pretty good. Rejecting 11% of product, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it still sounds fairly reasonable. But the problem is that once you've times those three together, what you suddenly realize in this scenario is that we've actually lost over half of our opportunity on the shop floor. And that's an expensive opportunity. It's no secret that any step change that we can make in OEE is going to obviously have a substantial impact on the bottom line. And so FactoryMES is what we would call a solution that's a lot more than just OEE. In fact, what separates ourselves from a lot of other vendors out there and what's very important to our customers in the food and beverage landscape is that we can offer real-time visibility across the entire value stream here. So some of these might resonate with yourselves. I'm sure we've got people on the call here. You've got batching or mixing operations. You might be forming, depositing, or filling product, right through to having ovens, chillers, and of course your final packing lines. And so what we do in FactoryMES is we break each one of these processes down into time and we break it down into quantity as well. And what that gives us then is the relevant insights that's going to be able for us to detect the losses that you're experiencing in the specific processes within that environment. So I'm really just going from top down here, calling a few of these out. It's including things like being able to actually track the quantity that was consumed in a batching environment. We can track the actual activities within a blending cycle, process parameters, again, temperature, humidity, right through to some big opportunities like tracking the labor on the line, changeover, sanitation times. A lot of the time we find, particularly in the food landscape, is that there's a tendency to produce too heavy or over your labor weight. In factory, a key goal of ours is to connect up to line side scales, check weighers, and actually provide you information on how you're overpacking your product, and then right through down here through to rejected product and what's the final case it's been packed. And although that's quite a very quick flow through that slide, not only is that going to give us insight into the losses in production, but if we overmix or if we overblend, for example, we might have a yield issue downstream, or we might end up starving the packing lines. So it's important that we know exactly what's going on in the process at any point in time, because that's exactly what's going to help us stay agile, responsive, and enable us to coordinate as a predictable manufacturer, which, as we've described in the previous webinars, is essential within this current climate that we're experiencing. And again, for those of you in the previous webinars, you'll notice we did some positioning with the factory solution, and we fit in between the wider business systems such as ERP and also the automation and control layer. And we typically, the solution as a whole can be broken up into 4 core modules, and the modules are as follows. So we have the performance module. So this is all about ensuring, if you can imagine operators, they've got touch screens on the shop floor. It's giving them closed loop feedback. It's showing them how they're doing in the moment. It's providing them with intelligent insights that's encouraging them to make adjustments to production so that we can impact it in the moment and prevent costly losses. We then have analytics. So this is our business intelligence layer, which is really used to form the basis of strategic reporting from our customers. It enables them to do trends and analysis over time so that they can start correlating their losses. We then have the improve module. So the improve module is very important. So this enables us to actually look at what's the actual payback that we're making from taking action on the stoppages and slow running opportunities that the system presents, as opposed to thinking, what is the potential ROI? This actually gives you a full monetary value on the action that you're taking. So it's very motivating on the shop floor. And then right through to our quality modules. So again, this is all about driving manufacturers to a paperless quality environment, but also having things like statistical process control, real-time quality assurance, and having everything stored electronically. So then when we have these internal, external audits that are of course very common, we can display that traceability within a couple of clicks. And so what I thought would be best for this session today, we obviously have got a time constraint here, so I'd love to go through all of these different modules, but we certainly don't have time for that. And really down to the stakeholder that we have on the call here, I thought it'd be best to give you an idea of the actual strategic reporting there that we have called analytics. So analytics has really been key to the success a lot of our customers have had out there in the field. We often have customers that will use analytics on a daily basis, help drive the operations, set valid KPIs to the production staff. And then we also have some of our enterprise customers like Intersnack, for example, that will often use analytics to see, well, how are our production sites performing side by side, so that they can tactically go ahead and set the next 3 months goals and targets. And to give you some background, we use Power BI as the viewer for the business intelligence tool. But the idea with analytics is that you've got access to different templates which are out of the box, but you've also got the ability to create your own outputs with these very, very quickly without the need for external IT support. So that way you can create your own insights that are going to be relevant to what you need to see into production, and that gives you a standardized way of reporting them. And so what I thought I'd do quickly with the analytics section is show you a taster of what you can achieve from a performance standpoint, as I know that's a key goal for everybody on the call here. So if you can imagine, for the sake of this example, if I'm a group production manager, let's say I've got a big quarterly meeting that's coming up next week, and in that quarterly meeting, I've got to assess all 4 production sites that I have. I've got to assess their performance, see how they've performed over the quarter. But more importantly, I've got to put them on the right track for the next quarter so that they can drive productivity. So with that being said, that's the agenda, and we'll jump right into it. So this is often a good starting point in those scenarios. So this is the map template. Whilst we can obviously see where our sites are geographically located on the map, what it's giving me is a breakdown of our site's performance over time, looking at specific manufacturing metrics. So if we look at the Johannesburg site here, Cape Town site, we've got a performance indicator of their OEE, their planned scheduled attainment, and that's from a high level. So if we look at the graphs at the bottom here, what's great to see is that from January 2018 to January 2020, if we include all 4 sites together, they've actually managed to improve their OEE by about 20 percentage points, which is brilliant. But as we said, this is a quarterly meeting. So if you can imagine, with analytics, you can manipulate the data. So I could put a quick filter on the dates here, drill down into the last 3 or 4 months. And in this scenario, it's again great to see that we've made some improvements in plan attainment and OEE. But actually, when we look at that last week in April, we can see that we've actually dropped the ball slightly, and it seems that the OEE has been lowered by potentially one of the production sites. So we've got the agenda now to uncover and identify which production site is pulling down this average of OEE. And to do that, I'm just going to go a layer down into production here. So this is the corporate scorecard. So this is showing me the equivalent insights, but broken down side by side, performance-wise, from a plan attainment standpoint and an OEE perspective. If we look at the Factory UK site here, although they've got the lowest OEE, we can see that actually they've made substantial gains throughout the end of the quarter. And that last week of April that we're focusing on, it doesn't look like they're bringing the average down. And we could say a similar thing for our Johannesburg site with a nice steady rise in OEE. And also for the Cape Town site at the top, they seem to have maintained that level of OEE that we're after. But unfortunately, when we drill down into the Boston site in the USA, although they've started high, we can see that they've actually significantly dropped in OEE. So we're in a situation now where we need to uncover, well, what's gone on the Boston site? Where are the opportunities that they have so that we can put them back on track for the next quarter? And this is exactly what analytics is all about. So if you can imagine now, I would filter my site specifically onto the Boston site. And what I might want to do is head over to our OEE by line template to start to uncover these opportunities. So this is showing us highest to lowest, all of our lines sorted by OEE. We've got the lowest performing OEE here, line 6 at the bottom at just over 70%. And underneath, what we've got an insight to is a breakdown of all those individual levers that make up OEE. And it's interactive. So if I click on line 6 with the biggest opportunity, what that's going to do is transition these other data points to just focus on line 6. And this is very, very powerful. So often we find in the field that a big limitation is that there's manufacturers that are measuring OEE, but when we get into the analysis phase of our data, sometimes rate, yield, and utilization can be treated rather separately, even though there are common bonds between those three levers. And so what a lot of manufacturers are doing, they're learning valuable insights on the speed that they can run at against the amount of rejected product and the uptime that they have. And if you can imagine slowly over time, what they're doing is they're finding that sweet spot as to how fast can I run this particular line to get the maximum OEE score possible, which is, of course, what it's all about. In this particular scenario, although if we clicked on line 6 and we hover over utilization, it seems like this tends to be the tool which is really causing the performance loss for the Boston site. So we're in a situation now where we need to really just look at line 6 and see, well, what can we do to uplift the downtime or reduce the downtime, if you like, that they have. And so what I'm going to do on the right here, so I'm just going to make that filter for line 6. And I'm going to head over to our downtime templates. So this is an example here. We're looking at line 6 on the top left. In blue here, we've got the total duration of hours and downtime within that last week in April. And in orange, we've got the actual number of occurrences. So we can assess, is this a one-off stop or is this a repetitive offender of production, which in this case, it looks like it is. Underneath, we've got the assets that make up that particular line. And on the right here, we've got the stoppage reasons for those particular machines. And again, so we're probably going to look at the decanting machine here. That seems to have the highest number of duration in hours of downtime in that week in April. So we're going to make a filter for that particular machine. And as you can see, it's transitioned all of the other stoppage reasons for that machine to go down. And what's raised with some significance here compared to the other reasons is that we seem to bump into this materials out of spec. So it sounds like potentially we're using the wrong packaging on a particular product that we're running. But as I say, as those other stoppage reasons are fairly insignificant, let's focus down and click into the materials out of spec. What you're seeing on the bottom left here is that we've got an idea of where those occurrences for that stoppage reason came up. So it looks around 10 a.m. is where we got the most duration, the highest number of occurrences. And actually, when we look at the individual entries on the right here, we can see that it's only when the second shift are running the turkey and cheese product on line 6. So this is very powerful. So very quickly, we've been able to go from a high group site level to drilling down into the Boston site, looking at line 6. And now we found a potential training opportunity to ensure that they're doing these validation checks at the start of every run now for this product to ensure that they've got the right packaging. Moving on, let's say in this particular scenario, we actually want to understand, well, how has this affected that ability for the second shift to hit the plan for that particular product? If you could imagine, we could keep those filters in place and head over to our plan attainment template here. So this is showing us the second shift's ability to hit the plan for turkey and cheese product from both a time perspective and also a quantity standpoint. When we look at the bottom totals here, it's quite interesting. So we can see generally on average, they tend to go 23% over the allowed time that they plan for, and they actually underproduce by about 30%. And so this is very powerful. So it shows that if we could eradicate that downtime they're experiencing on line 6, that's obviously going to have a substantial impact on their ability to hit the plan for this particular product. And a key point that I want to point out here is that once we're building all that historical data, it becomes very, very powerful. So we've often got manufacturers that will tend to look at these kind of historical plan attainment reports, and they'll start to learn which products run best on which lines with a certain shift on, for example. And that way, if they have essential orders that they have to fulfill, or they've got custom demand to hit, they could be confident that they should run this product on that line, for example. Just finishing off now, if we want to take this a step further, just for the sake of this demonstration, if we say, well, seeing as we're focusing on the second shift here, let's have a look and see if there's any other opportunities with any of the other products that they're potentially running. So what I would do quickly with the second shift is put a highlight filter on here, and then I'd probably go to our product performance template. So this is showing us, filtered by the second shift, their performance across the entire portfolio, and it's sorted in by OEE highest to lowest here. So in this particular case, we can see the English muffin has the lowest OEE. So if we click into it, we'll be able to see what's going on. And in this scenario here, we can see that they run this product on line 5. And here we get a breakdown of all the individual runs performance broken down by OEE and the individual levers that make up OEE as well. And with an average OEE of 46%, we can see that actually it's a problem with rates. Speed seems to be lowering that OEE score as opposed to utilization this time. So if you can imagine, as opposed to looking at utilization, what we probably want to do in this scenario is actually look at the slow running reasons when they're running this particular product, specifically on line 5. So I could click onto as you can imagine, the slow running by line. Look at line 5 here. In blue, obviously, we get the duration in minutes of slow running. And again, in orange, we get the number of occurrences. And what we can see in this particular scenario is actually that the flow wrapper seems to have substantially the highest amount of slow running minutes as the machine on that particular line. So if we just click into that machine quickly, what we can see is that the highest reason for that to slow run is actually caused by the plastic broke or tearing. So it sounds like this isn't an operator training issue. It's not a problem with the machine. It's actually a problem with the quality of plastic. And I know for a fact that we use this plastic on our Johannesburg site, our Cape Town site, our UK site, and we actually use it on multiple products as well, on multiple lines. So in this particular scenario, it'd be interesting to see, has this impacted any other sites within our plant network? And that's the great thing about analytics. Although we can drill down very, very quickly and see what's going on, we can also drill back out of production and understand if that's affected any of the other production variables. So I could just make that filter here to all sites, all lines, and all products. And what we can see here is that actually in this scenario, in that last week of April that we're looking at, it's actually caused over 200 slow running minutes. So we know right now that there's a business case to speak to purchasing in head office, look at potentially either testing the quality of that plastic and ensuring it's in spec, or alternatively resourcing to a different supplier. So I appreciate I'm coming up to the end here. So it wasn't I would love to have shown you obviously a lot more functionality with the solution, but I hope the message that's come across so far is that it's really the data-driven decisions like this that have enabled so many of our customers to have success with the system, and specifically benefit from a return on investment as well, which is of course what it's all about. And so with that being said, thank you very much. And now I'm going to hand back to Dilley, who's going to round off the webinar and see if we've got any questions that need to be answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. I think that was an excellent, very quick overview of overall equipment effectiveness. And as Kurt started off his initial presentation, he did a very quick demo of a line running jams, and you saw the OEE with some of the stoppages moving from 100% OEE to about 57% OEE. He also showed you that you in your companies have already made investments in automation and control systems, and you have some flavor of ERP, and the factory product fits in between as a sandwich between the ERP and the control and automation system. So some of the work that Rifle Shot together with Aptean has done in the local environment, and based on actual data that has been taken from customers, there are tremendous improvements in OEE, and of course, from a financial perspective, tremendous benefits from a financial benefit. So if you're sitting at an OEE of, let's say, the example of 57%, and you move that up by 5%, in the one customer case study that we did recently on 2 lines, it's an improvement of 12 million rands. And at these times, where times are very, very tough and challenging, you can imagine the financial and the production benefits of OEE. And this is an area that Rifle Shot, together with Aptean, has a proven methodology of coming on site to your premises with a proven methodology that has been tried and tested around the world in terms of looking at your current as-is situation and how do we map a journey for you to achieve this. And because the offering comes out of the box, the implementation time is very, very quick relative to a number of other systems that we've seen over the years. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Caroline and Sarah, and we'll take a few questions.
Thanks, Dilley, and Kurt and Ian for great presentations. There are a couple of questions coming in, so if any of the audience do have questions, please feel free to type them into the questions box, and we will get to those as we move through. So the first question that's here is, what is a typical implementation time frame? So I'm guessing that one is for Kurt.
Thanks, Sarah. That's a really good question. So a key point with FactoryMES is we're a solution that's out of the box in terms of we can install very, very quickly compared to some of the traditional MES vendors that have to be built from the ground up. So typical implementations will obviously depend on the number of lines, but I would say we're talking weeks here. We're not talking months and months and months. Reason being is because if we can install faster, what we're going to end up having is quicker time to benefits with the solution. So it enables us then to get into the analysis phase of our data a lot faster, so that we can start taking action on the opportunities. So we've got a very prescriptive approach that enables us to install very, very quickly. So good question. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Kurt. Another question that we have for the panel is, what sort of ROI could we expect in terms of monetary ROI or OEE or time savings?
There's another good question. So it's hard to calculate the actual expected ROI without seeing, the production figures to start with. But what I will say is that we've worked with, lots of manufacturers, right across EMEA, and any established manufacturer, if they're sort of, raising their OEE by kind of 5-6%, I don't think I've ever seen it, lower than around 6 figures or so. And then, the sky's the limit, as it were. So particularly what we see is that the biggest savings are for when people are going to, manual ways of recording downtime. Often what we see is that they had performance gaps, that they weren't too sure of the opportunities on the shop floor. So connecting to automation and control layer when you've had someone that's been, manually logging things like downtime is where we see almost a significant uplift within the first few months. But that's not to say that, customers that are already got good strategies in place can't improve their OEE. We've got a lot of customers out there on the field that they make that consistency of improvement year on year as well. So again, hard to calculate the exact figure because we'd often have to do it on a like-for-like basis, but it's certainly up there in the 6, 7 figures depending on the OEE improvement.
Great, thanks, Kurt.
No problem.
And I've got one final question, and I think this one is for Kurt as well, on the questions board. typically, how are companies measuring OEE? I know you mentioned that you use kind of time and quantity, but typically, can you just reiterate how are companies measuring OEE?
Yeah, sure. And it seems to vary quite a lot around the field. I would say what I've commonly seen within the food and beverage space is that there's a lot of operators that will have they'd have a piece of paper, and every time the machine stops, what they'll do is they'll write down the time it stopped and then the time that they got back up and running. And then what you have then is at the end of the shift, someone will have almost a full-time role where they'll put that data that's been handwritten into spreadsheets in, say, Excel is a common one, and then they'll kind of battle through the numbers to get some trends and analysis going. And I would say that's the most common scenario that we see. Often, unfortunately, because for manufacturers that we see doing it on paper, although you can log, downtime, things like slow running often are the key ones that get missed, and also the smaller stops of production. So I often see that when we're measuring OEE on paper, a big constraint is that no one's logging those 2 to 3 minute stops that actually can significantly add up over time. But good question. So yeah, a lot of them we see a mixture of paper and Excel from a trending perspective.
Great, thank you, Kurt.
No
so
problem.
there are no more questions on the board. I wonder if I should hand back to Dilley to see if Dilley has any questions in.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I think those were 3 excellent questions, totally related to business. And there are some benchmarks that can be provided to the people that ask those questions. So in summary, I would like to thank the attendees. We know you are very busy running your production environments. We know you also have requests for other webinars. We all have a number of requests for webinars, so we appreciate you taking the time. We hope that you've benefited from this presentation. We'd also like to offer you the opportunity to work with you on this journey to improve your overall equipment effectiveness, as well as your manufacturing processes that Ian touched on the journey. That's a speciality of both RSPH and Aptean. In conclusion, I would like to thank Kurt and Sarah joining us all the way from the UK this morning. Also like to thank Ian and Caroline. This concludes the first part of our 3 sessions on the changing landscape of food processing. We would be in contact with yourselves for future upcoming events in this regard. With that, we thank you and be safe.